Welcome back to Lucid Fitness Podcast. I'm Erik and this is Sarah, and today's going to be the third episode of our Psychology of a Fit Person mini-series, where we talk about our trials and tribulations of going to the gym and getting into a fit lifestyle to help you feel more comfortable with your journey as well. On the last two episodes, we talked about our childhood journey leading up to when we started taking fitness seriously. And then the episode after that, we talked about our pre-gym period where we started lifting more seriously, but we still really hadn't gotten into the gym environment and started actually lifting in a traditional way. And that leads us into this episode where we're going to talk more about our first time in the gym and the aspects that made it a good or negative experience and kind of how we took those experiences and evolved from it. I know that I had a few periods in my life where I was in a gym in a less traditional setting, once in high school and then a few times in college, but it wasn't until after college that I really started honing in on actual traditional lifting in the gym. Did you have I know you've talked about it a bit in the previous episodes, but did you have some gym experience before your first time in the gym?
Yeah, I had a couple. My family was always kind of a member of the YMCA. So I remember I think it was 14 at the time, was like the first time I went to like the gym, and I went with my mom. And I think we also had they're kind of like personal trainers, kind of walk us through the machines and that sort of thing. I think that was my first experience with like being in a gym. I don't think I ever did it again. Maybe one more time, but I remember feeling very intimidated. Of course, I was like a little 14-year-old girl.
As a child,
Yeah, I was
a lot
little.
Of things are intimidating as a child.
Yeah, and it was dark, and there were a lot of people, and I just remember feeling really intimidated.
Sure.
So I didn't really do that very much, and so there was a few times off and on in my 20s where I went, but it was never more than really one time. It was, either like an on-base gym, and it was always completely packed and crowded, and there was no daycare or anything. So those fell through quite consistently. So I never really did anything until I moved back in with my parents, and my mom looked at me and she said, "You need to go do something like for you." And I was like, okay. And so and I think this is why the YMCA sticks out to me, because that was like my first thought. Oh, I could join the YMCA, which I did. And they had childcare, and that was like the first time that I was like, now I go to the gym.
Right. I know you mentioned the intimidation factor as you were a child. Do you think that played a role in how long it took you to get back in the gym? Maybe you had this perspective of what the gym was like before.
Yeah, I think I really did. And at that point in time, like this was a good number of years ago, that was still in the point of time where women weren't really in the free weight section. There weren't women doing, heavy barbell squats and deadlifts and that sort of thing. It was like you did the adductor machine and cardio.
Right.
And so I never really wanted to be like alone. I didn't really feel like I knew what I was doing. I wasn't even really sure if I was supposed to be there. Right. So I think that was part of why I, felt intimidated doing that for such a long time.
That's interesting. And I imagine it's a pretty common thing, especially for parents who want to get their child started early. If that parent doesn't have a good amount of experience in the gym and doesn't have really the comfort in the gym themselves, then it's not going to be particularly easy to take your child and give them an overwhelmingly positive experience, right?
And neither of my parents really went to the gym. Yeah. Like we did athletic things, but even in their high school and college days, my dad was like a competitive cheerleader, but he didn't like go to the gym. And we did competitive martial arts, and we did those sort of things, but we never went to the gym, and they never went to the gym. So I think they knew it was good, and they were trying to expose us to it, but didn't really know what to do.
Right. And so after that experience, it was quite a bit more time before you went back to the back to the gym, and you started out at the Y. Like,
Yeah.
what was that like when you started?
I remember it being less intimidating. I think just because I was older and I was honestly just so desperate to be out of the house and have a break and have some sort of physical activity to do. And at that point, I feel like gyms have changed a lot. Like before, in the early 2000s, gyms were a lot darker. It was kind of, the lighting was darker, the environment was a little bit more closed in. But now they're a lot brighter, they're a lot bigger, they're a lot more open, just like in general. And so that felt like, oh, okay, this is fine. And at that point, I had been doing a lot of research. That's when the internet and YouTube had kind of grown up a little bit, and women were doing more weightlifting and they were doing more physique things and heavy lifting and squats and deadlifts. And so I had like seen it and like, I want to do that. So I don't know how much of my want to do it overrode being overwhelmed by it, or I just ignored it and I was like, no, I will do this.
Yeah. I think you kind of have to. Like, that's just life in general. Most things that have a positive impact on your life are uncomfortable at first, and so you just kind of brute force it through.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So did you stay at Y for a while, or where, in terms of when you were having your kids, like where along the kids' journey was it? Did you already have all 4 kids, and then what was it like taking them to the gym? And then I assume they have babysitters or whatever they do there.
Yeah.
You would take them, drop them off for an hour, and then just go work out? Or?
Yeah, so I did have all 4 of them. They were pretty little at that point, kind of just mid-range. I was like 8 to 4. And then, we would get 2 hours of included daycare. So I would basically know once I dropped them off, I had 2 hours to get done whatever I wanted to get done. Yeah. And they were going to be entertained and I was going to be right there. So we'd all pack up in the car, and it was before they were all in school, because we are homeschooling at the time. So that was just part of our routine, is before we started school, we'd all go to the gym. They would have some run around time and some outside time, because they also took them up to the track, or they would take them out to play. And then I would get my workout done, and then we'd go back home and do school. That was kind of our routine. But I knew that I had like this amount of time to get this done. So I would schedule out what I wanted to do, and I had scheduled out kind of roughly, still figuring out like what exercises to do. But that was really like my exploratory period of lifting weights and trying to figure out how to do a lateral raise correctly, and how to do face pulls correctly, and how to do deadlifts correctly. And I think I worked out there for 6 months, no, maybe less, maybe 3 or 4 months before I started working there.
Oh, then you started
Then I started working there, yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. And what was it like? What was the gym culture like? I know Y generally appeals to more like families, maybe older people. I assume there wasn't much of a gym bro culture there. It was probably more of stay-at-home moms and old people like during the time.
Yeah, it kind of depended on the time of day. Like if you got there at 5 a.m, there were some of those up-and-coming gym rats, the boys who were between the ages of 15 and 19 who were like blossoming gym rats.
Yeah, the ones still on their like parents' Y membership.
Yeah, yes.
They're starting to.
And they were kind of breaking into the bro-ness of themselves.
Yeah, for sure.
And then after that point, it was majoritively older people and then parents.
Right.
For the most part, yeah.
Right. I assume having that similarity to the other people there made it a bit more accommodating, like comfort-wise, when you first started, because you're like, oh, these people are like me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you said you really didn't think a whole lot, but for the sake of this episode, like what kind of was going through your mind in that like 3-month period? Because I assume once you started working there, like you got a lot more comfortable a lot quicker, because you're there all the time, you're starting to recognize people, things like that. But maybe that 3-month period where you were going from never really being in a gym to being there presumably a lot, like more often than not. Yeah, what was it like? Like, what were the thoughts in your head? Was it primarily goal focused, or was there Was there any sort of doubt or any sort of what was going on through your head?
I think there was a good few weeks in the beginning where I was very self-conscious.
Sure.
Like I was very like, and then I think everyone but goes through that where they're like, who's looking at me? Who's watching me? Am I doing it right? All of those kind of feelings. And then that quickly subsided when I one track focused to try and find the most fit person who went to the gym, which I did. Her name was Latevia. She is an IFBB pro, and her husband at the time was also an IFBB pro and personally trained people. And I like zeroed in. She also had, at that time, she had 5 kids. And so we were the same age. I had 4 kids. She had 5 kids, but she like was doing the thing I wanted to do. And I zeroed in and became her friend as fast as I possibly could. I was like, we are going to be best friends. Yeah. And I still talk to her to this day. And I was like, you like, this is what I want. And she goes, oh yeah. She kind of just took me under her wing, and I did a mock prep with her. She helped me set up all my food stuff. She was really like the person who like held my hand, text message through text message of, okay, this is the workout we're going to do today. And when you meet me, this is what we're going to have. And this is what you're going to eat for breakfast. This is what you're going to eat for lunch. This is what you're going to eat for dinner. This is how you're going to weigh it. This is how you're going to cook it so the macros are right. Like she walked me through every little piece of it. And I think that's when I really got a taste for, oh yeah, I like this.
The mentor side of things is obviously getting a well-experienced, good mentor can drastically change your experience. Having somebody teach you one-on-one, it's invaluable. Absolutely. As you learned, right? Yeah. And it's kind of a shortcut for a lot for this sport, like especially if you can find a good personal trainer that tolerates you and you tolerate them. It can give you a massive benefit, right? I'm not saying sign up for the first 18-year-old at Vasta Fitness that tells you they're a personal trainer, but if you're legit, like go out there and look for somebody. Even like an online trainer can really make a massive difference in getting you started, because a lot of the things that are overwhelming or daunting for beginners, these people, they have down to literal science, literal algorithms, like the Lucid Fitness app that we designed. Like a lot of the systems in there, it's like all of the things that you feel overwhelmed by have been put into an app to
just
use.
Plug and play.
And I'm not saying everybody needs to use the app, but that mentor, having somebody who's walking you through all of the little elements, I think that it can make a massive difference, especially when you're starting, because it imbues a confidence in you that can often take years, right? Like if you go and you have and it's any skill set, you don't typically want to be arrogant. You don't typically want to be like, no, I know what's best. And for men, it's very common, especially in the gym. It's like, oh, I had a gym class in high school. I know what I'm doing. But in reality, you don't know what you're doing. And having somebody teach you the ropes, like that had to have been a massive benefit. So you trained with her, she taught you all the food. That's the food side of things. The fact that you learned that so early, that's pretty big too.
Yeah, I think it was definitely helpful. And having someone who I could just go to and like ask, because I specifically remember going, I cannot eat rice anymore. I can't stand it. She goes, okay, well just do tater tots or something. Yeah. I'm like, oh, I could do something else. It just having someone give you permission, like I could have figured that out for myself, right? But having someone kind of give you permission to be like, yeah, well, just do this.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I don't know. There's just an element of it just feels so much better when you can kind of walk behind somebody and learn rather than just trying to figure it all out for yourself. Because especially when it's something so physical, like fitness is so in the trenches, you're doing it, you're just trying to figure it out, that I think even parts feel even more daunting. Because you can't think your way out of doing it, and you can't think your way into doing it better, because you're just like, well, my body's just trying to function.
Yeah. And that's part of the issue with beginners is the fact that everything online would lead you to believe that this is a thinking man's sport. And I've mentioned it in some of our our core principle episodes, that this is a doing man sport or doing woman sport, right? And you can't think your way to muscles, right? And I was thinking of this, a way of describing this not too long ago, and it's like, if you have 10 hours in your week for a mixture of research and actually going to the gym and working out, spending 9 of those 10 hours in the gym is always going to give you more than spending 9 hours researching 1 hour in the gym.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is, the more you move, the more weights you move, the more you exercise, the better results you're going to get. And that's not to say research doesn't have its place, but we sometimes see the not even sometimes, we often see the inversion of that, where people spend 20 hours a week doing research, and then when it comes time to actually get in the gym, it's like, oh, I can barely make it to one workout a week, right? And if that's all you have time for, that's all you have time for. If you have time for research, you have time for going to the gym, right? And so reminding yourself that going to the gym, that is the process. And while research can be helpful, that is, you could go to the gym without never reading anything online. Just go to the gym, start talking to people. You can learn everything you need to know. And some people will say, oh, bro science this, bro science. It's like, bro science exists for a reason, right? People did bro science for a long time. And, it's not the scientifically optimal way to do things, but it is a good way of people getting in the gym and moving. Yeah. And I think that that's where, the bro science kind of looks at it from a picture that's more realistic, is the fact that most people don't care to, or don't want to, or aren't able to do the scientifically optimal things all the time. Some people don't like deadlifts. Yeah. I don't like squats. And so me jumping on a squat dominant leg, I'm going to be miserable, more likely to miss my workouts, more likely to not do the work to begin with. So why would I want to do squats? Why would I not just design a system that's better for me? But I'm getting away from the point here. So you had a strong mentor going into your first year. So that probably made a big difference.
Huge difference. Yeah. What about you? Did you have somebody that walked you through, or did you just kind of start going to the gym?
I did. I had one of my buddies, Ben, and I mentioned him in a previous episode. Him and I have always had like a kind of collaborative growth in terms of fitness, not just fitness and nutrition, but with specifically fitness and nutrition. Him and I, he started earlier than me. He played football, or he played some sport, I don't remember specifically, in high school. And so he started like gaining size, and I took note of that because he was my close friend. And I remember there were times where, I don't know if it was before or early in my gym times, where he invited me to the gym and was like teaching me things. And so there's a certain element of him teaching me. But for the most part, my arrogance led me to the gym. After I got out of my apartment complex gym, I went to a 24-hour fitness. It was, at the time, it was the closest one to where I was living. And it's a blurry experience because I was there for so long, probably 8 or 9 years, but it was definitely more than just families. Like, families were there, but there was still it wasn't a Gold's Gym or a Vasa of today, but it was more bro-y, right? There were, at the time, there were a lot of cardio bunnies. There were dudes who, to me at the time, they were massive dudes, like big dudes who clearly knew a lot more than me. But again, I had this mentality of just doing heavy compound movements and focusing specifically on only the ones that the internet really preached, right? Deadlifts, squats, bench press, those very traditional exercises. Those were my go-to. And so when I got there, I had already kind of been doing lesser forms of those in the gym at my apartment complex. And so when I got there, I was at first overwhelmed by how much there was. I think that in my head I had pictured, because the gym at my college was very, very free weight, because they had a large football team, and so there were power racks everywhere. And I didn't really imagine that there would be so many machines, but in the 24-hour fitness, the whole like central area was machines, and then there was like a free weight section kind of tucked back. But yeah, when I got there, I was most certainly overwhelmed by the options, but there were still a few iconic exercises where I saw them and I'm like, oh, I know how to do this. And so I started with, I remember doing my first few sets of free weight barbell bench press, and like, man, this is way harder, because like I had been doing it on the Smith machine, so I hadn't developed the stabilizers, and so like holding the bar was weird at first. But I had been doing deadlifts, so I was able to continue to do deadlifts, and that was when I first started squats, and those were the big ones. And I think one of the biggest influences on me early was the idea that 3 times a week full body. I don't know where I got this idea, somewhere online, but I got this idea that full body was the answer. Someone had sold me on frequency, so going multiple times a week for the same muscle groups, and I latched onto that for pretty much the first 3 or 4 years.
Okay, wow.
And so I did full body, and so I'd go in, I'd do either deadlifts or squats, pretty much. I didn't start doing leg press until much later, and then I do heavy bench press, some sort of shoulder press, some sort of row, arms, and then I don't even think in the beginning I even did calves, but I was probably in and out in like the first hour or so. But yeah, and the big thing with Ben and I's relationship is whenever I'd go with him, I would go and do his workout. And so my first several years were just doing full body, and then having Ben try to convince me to do like a higher volume workout. And he was always bigger than me, but I had always attributed it to different body types, and he has very much a different body type. So I think he put on muscle a lot quicker because he could put on weight a lot quicker, because it was a large struggle of mine putting on weight in the beginning.
Oh yeah.
A lot of that because he talked about food, but we didn't talk about nutrition till a long time down the road. Like, that wasn't even, I was sold on the idea the gym gave you results. Going to the gym as frequently as you can gave you results. And then I was sold on frequency. I was sold on going three full body workouts a week made more sense to me than going and doing higher volume with like a more traditional split. And so I did full body for a long time. I think it's a great way to build like a strong foundation. But my first few times in the gym, it was very much, I remember it being overwhelming and overstimulating. And I almost remember the internal struggle more than I remember actually doing the workouts. Like I remember, the embarrassment the first time I failed on a barbell bench press. I remember that. I remember people rushing over to help me. And, obviously there's always that one guy who's like, yeah, you gotta lower the weight and work on your form, and like trying to be a good influence.
Yeah.
But it's like you aren't thinking reasonably after you embarrass yourself like that. And so I remember lots of unsolicited advice from other people. A lot of, I don't know if as a woman you got that.
No,
but
not at all.
I got it a lot in the beginning, and my arrogance really didn't let me listen to them. The people were just, trying to be helpful. Yeah. And especially back then, bros were very much, it was more communicative, I think, in the terms of, because everyone wasn't assuming they were hyper informed like they are now. Because everyone has like, oh, I follow this guy, he knows better than everyone else in my gym, why would I listen to anyone in the gym? And everyone kind of has that same mentality now. because they're following, so-and-so, or they're doing so-and-so, which is better than what anything you could say. And so back then it was a lot more discussion about, optimal choices. And I think that the most common pushback for me is like when I told people I did full body. And especially after I started getting results too. When I told people I did every single big muscle group in the same day, they're like, "Oh, that sounds miserable." Like, does that even work?
It does sound
And
miserable.
then once I started getting my initial, muscle built on, they started like, actually, oh, that's interesting. But it wasn't until much later that I started realizing that I was like being held back by just purely volume for the most part. Because I'm a big volume guy now. I think volume is king. And so I do remember lots of, there was the dark years of my gym experience where I didn't talk to anyone and no one really talked to me. But before that, definitely got a lot of different perspectives from people. And I spent a lot of time just watching. I do it now too. You catch me sometimes, I'm just like watching people, like learning. And I did that early too. And I think that was my mentor, because I was too arrogant to really go and say, I need your advice. Right? Even with my close friend, Ben, it's like, nah, mine's better. Full body's better, But I was wrong. But the way I learned was like seeing a big person, a big dude on this machine or that machine, or doing this, whatever he's doing. I remember watching. Is being like, okay, well, I can't do it right now because that'd be weird, but I'm going to try this down the road, and I'd like stick it back in my head, and then the next time I'm doing doing chest, I may try that. But also the full body held me back I didn't have the same experimental phase because I was so locked in on compound movements, and I still am locked in, but again, when we're talking about full body, you don't really get to experiment a lot when you're focusing on compounds, because you only have time for, I remember the longest full bodies I was doing was like an hour and a half, and it was like 5 sets per muscle group or something like that. And
I'm sorry, that sounds exhausting.
It was.
I feel like you're probably cooked after that.
Oh, for sure, I was. And I didn't realize how cooked until I started lifting with Ben, and he'd be like, all right, we're done. And I'm like, what do you mean we're done? Like, it's only been an hour. He's like, yeah, like we're fine. And then the next day I'd be like, I can't open my chest because I'm so sore from the volume. But it never clicked in my head that it was a better workout, it was a better structure. So, but it was an interesting time. Like, my experimenting was very much consuming internet stuff and then watching people in the gym, and honestly recognizing the difference. Recognize, like, why does everybody online say this, but everyone in the gym, everyone big does this? And that's when I really started recognizing, okay, there's more to this. There's more to this than just doing, what Reddit, or whoever I was following, what Reddit was telling me was scientifically optimal, right? There's more to it than this. And that seed got planted early for me. And it's what eventually led to, the Lucid principles, and this, what we're doing here in general is this idea that scientifically optimal things isn't always the optimal thing. Does that make any sense?
I feel like it does make sense, yeah.
Because scientifically optimal doesn't take into account where we are in our journey, what we're capable of doing. And for me, full body very well may have been my optimal, but now that I know more, I understand that for me, volume, I respond very well to volume. So I can't help but wonder, like, had I done a more traditional higher volume split early, if I wouldn't have gotten greater results. But it's all hindsight, right? And so it's hard to look at it from this perspective of like what I know now and like what I could have done better, because I wouldn't have got to where I am now if it wasn't for those like seeds being planted early. Like, why don't I see as many people doing these things as the online makes me think, right? And I implore the audience to think about this, especially when they're watching things online. It's like, when you go to the gym for your first few times, take note and take note of what the biggest people or fittest people or the people who look most like what you want to look like, what they're doing, and really taking into account the difference between what you see online, because I think that's an important thing to register is online's all about performance and making things look good. And more often than not, going into a gym is going to open your eyes to everything you see online isn't exactly as truthful or as, and it's not, it's still exercise, but it's just not. Most people aren't going to the gym and doing these crazy exotic circuits where they're sweating and, like they're just going and, lifting weights, to the best of their ability. And so keep an eye on that, because for me, it was a very transformative thing, and like being able to break out of that, like only science mentality and more into, the bro science of like, this may not be optimal, but I like this movement a heck of a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you guys can tell that first gym experiences, they vary wildly based on the person. But I think that one of the most common things with going to the gym for the first time is it's uncomfortable. It's just uncomfortable in different ways. It's uncomfortable in ways that we could never tell you all of the different ways that you can be embarrassed, or you can, there's a certain element of being uncomfortable, embracing the uncomfortable, and just kind of getting through the rough first few months before you're like, okay, well, I've been going to the gym now for a while, and then you'll continue to improve and you'll continue to recognize your own growth, and you'll see like, oh, when I first started a few months ago, I was doing this silly thing, but now I'm doing this instead. And so honestly, a lot of it's just the mind game, and a lot of it is getting through the process of convincing yourself to keep going even when it's uncomfortable. And if you're interested in continuing to work on your mental game, I do highly recommend that you go and you watch our 7th core principle video. We talk about exactly this, building the discipline and the willpower and the consistency that you need to get to those first positive feedback loops.